Welcome to CTG Weekly with Mark and Andre, a weekly podcast where we discuss whatever we find exciting that's happening in games right now. In our inaugural episode, we talk about gambling on Twitch, Destiny 2, and Overwatch 2. Andre! Twitch is enforcing gambling changes now.
It's true. It's been a while since we've been trying to get this podcast rolling, and I suppose it took a while, but lucky enough for us, from when it got announced to when it's being rolled out, so we get to talk about the last couple of weeks of people reacting to this, and now what it means for, I suppose, streamers who are usually using this or gambling on stream or looking at streaming content.
Yeah, so as of today, I guess it went live 2 days ago on October 18th. We're now October 20th.
Right.
Twitch has put into effect its new policies that are limiting gambling on Twitch as a platform. I'll just I'll read the single paragraph that is of most interest to us, which is on October 18th, we'll be making a policy update to prohibit the streaming of gambling sites that include slots, roulette, or dice games that are licensed in the US or other jurisdictions that provide sufficient consumer protection. And I will not go ahead and read the websites that it's prohibiting, but that is what Twitch is doing.
Right. So reactions to these have been a bit mitigated, and I'm of two minds. So we should really lay out the two aspects of this that are kind of the most normative. So one is the kinds of games, right? So they're listing slots, roulette, and dice games primarily. And the other aspect of this is how they're determining which ones of these to crack down on, which is unlicensed in the US, which is a wonderfully specific in terms of geography, but vague in terms of what you're actually going to be doing kind of ruling. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, one of the first things that came to my mind was that this doesn't really affect gambling on the platform. It really is just a ban of a couple key sites. As most people pointed out, there were a lot of articles about this and some live streamers are talking about this. Sports betting in this policy is still legal unless that has changed as of today, which
Nope.
I don't think it has. The international for Dota 2 is happening right now, and like on all the live streams leading up to the international is brought to you by GG.bet, and that's all over Twitch. So I mean,
Yeah.
what is this really doing? Not even getting into the more granular parts of this, where like most of the games live streamed on Twitch have gambling woven into them as systems, right? And so what does this do? It makes it look like something is happening, and it's not a non-policy, right? It's not nothing. But I think there's some real questions that we have to ask about, well, what is gambling doing in all our games? Because it's a lot more than what this can handle, I think.
Yeah, so I mean, Twitch is trying to tackle a problem transnationally that like national governments have problems tackling in their own jurisdictions, right? So for listeners, you and I have been working on sort of gambling affordances in games for like 5 years now.
Yep.
And we've gotten the chance to meet some legislators over the years and to talk with gambling scholars from other jurisdictions like Ireland and the UK and Australia and Germany. And every country reacts differently because every country has completely different norms around gambling and what's considered sort of socially permissible or a good for the community, or that it has some kind of impact. So already there's a problem here where Twitch is taking sort of a US-centric approach to how it understands gambling, which really might not map onto other jurisdictions. So that's already kind of an issue for me. The second issue, which I think is even funnier, is they're basically tackling streamers who are showing gambling content on their channel. But for people who are listening to this and who might be going on Twitch, a lot of streamers have channel point systems from Streamlabs extensions, and those allow you to gamble channel points on what the streamer's doing. So let's say they queue up a match, and the streamer's mod set up a gamba, which will tell you, the streamer is going to win or lose this match, and you bet your points. And you get more points, and you can use those points to become a VIP in the chat and get special badges, or get the streamer to do specific things like take a water break or do push-ups, depending on whatever they've loaded into their Streamlabs deck. So it's funny to me because I feel like they're tackling streaming that is inside of the video box of the stream, but they're not tackling gambling parts that are part of the platform at a much more integrated level.
Yeah, so there's the platform part that they can't really touch, and then there's the game part that also they can't really touch, because if you looked at some of the big games that are streamed online, things like Genshin, things like Lost Ark, that there were instances where players would donate money to streamers fully knowing that those streamers were going to use that money to buy capsules or to try and hone their gear in Lost Ark, which is effectively a gambled roll on if your gear is going to increase, right? And players are doing this just to watch. And so while the players, or while the viewers themselves aren't actually gambling, they're technically buying entertainment time. They're contributing to the purchase of entertainment time. If you boil it down to its core, it is still gambling, but it's not. And so we're left with this really abstract mess of how we actually approach this stuff. And it makes a policy like the one that's being applied here seem very... I don't know. It's a token gesture,
right? There's a thing here where listeners might be wondering, why are we starting off this podcast series talking about Twitch, right, and not something that's inside of a game? We're talking about a streaming platform that's outside of this, but I think it's really important to understand how many people engage with this. So, I mean, we looked at stats a couple weeks back, and I think Twitch accounts for something close to 80% of all live streaming that's watched.
It was 76%, yeah.
76, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are engaging with this kind of content, and Twitch is drawing this weirdly arbitrary line between, dice games, roulette, and slots. But what's the difference between somebody who's running a slot machine on screen and somebody who's just opening, wish packs in Genshin for 3 hours? Especially for viewers who aren't getting money in either case, they're consuming the same kind of content, which is the experience of watching the streamer gamble away a certain type of currency for certain goods. And even if we move past the sort of money to skin combo of one is gambling, one is not, there are places in Europe that have already legislated that like skins constitute the kind of outcome that gambling legislation should work on. And so it's so woven into the experience of so many games, and for this to be sort of the line in the sand, I think it's a bit silly.
It is, but it's also a cultural context issue, right? The things that they're banning, slots, roulette, dice games, they look like casino games because they are casino games, but the image of the game overlays onto the activity in a way that something like Lost Ark, something like Genshin doesn't really. The sports betting thing is actually the most incoherent part of this, because culturally, at least in North America, it's established as like gambling and associated with problematic gambling and addiction in a way that's really why the slots, roulette, and dice games are being targeted, right? Because there's a very clear line between like the cultural vice state that these things have, these slots, roulette, and dice games have, and that Genshin, Lost Ark, all these, I mean, even just getting loot in World of Warcraft or a game like Destiny, they don't have those same connotations yet.
Right.
And so they're completely off the radar.
I was talking to a colleague from Europe who's been doing work on sort of the Belgian loot box ban and how ineffective it has been, and he was um, he was telling me part of the line that this is sort of indicating is also this old division between what we understand as random gambling and sort of skill-based games, and the fact that certain games like poker and blackjack have a skill component to them, where these kinds of like rolling dice might not. Except that really, if you're really good at manipulating stats or doing counting,
Yeah.
they kind of become the same thing. And the people who are sports betting, a lot of them are part of fantasy leagues and are really engaged with an intimate understanding of player statistics and how to bet more accurately. And so I think all of this is just muddied together. And yeah, it just goes back to this idea that the gesture is kind of a token engagement with it to say that they did something and that they're not allowing gambling
Yeah.
while still really allowing multiple forms of gambling, arguably the more profitable forms of gambling or the ones that bring in more video engagement for them. So,
I'm gonna do some speculative uh, analysis of why this may have happened, because actually something was jogged in my memory here. Wasn't there a high profile streamer that recently, sometime before September 20th, but not too long before, didn't they like lose a ton of money on stream, and like didn't their father call them live to be like, what are you doing with your life?
I'm
Didn't this
99%
happen?
sure. Yeah, I'm 99% sure this is XQC, who at a certain point was the largest streamer on Twitch. I think is still probably in the top five, either in revenue or view count, and streams a lot of chess. And yeah, he lost millions of dollars uh, streaming on Twitch that he was gambling away, and had his father call him in the middle of the stream. And this sparked a lot of controversy with like the way that also the parasocial aspects of Twitch are integrating with gambling, and sort of the possible performativity of displaying like a moment of trauma or something like
Yeah,
really bad
that's
happening on
that's
there's
really
so many
what
things
this
that are
is.
integrated.
Yeah, I
um,
think that's actually what this is that there was a very high profile case, and I'm sure he was not the only streamer who was doing this, but that did get some traction in games media. And I
right.
remember passively seeing it before this announcement was made, and it totally makes sense that if you have a streamer at that level with that many young viewers, that the platform is going to feel some kind of pressure to address it. And this is now, thinking of that context, this really is a band-aid for that situation to try and prevent any kind of crackdown,
Right.
which is why they're doing the bare minimum here, and there isn't a deeper, I don't know, discussion of what is the platform wholly enabling given how
Yeah.
games kind of work these days.
One of maybe the last aspect to leave listeners on this specific topic with is also the enforcement that's discussed is incredibly vague. Like this just falls into their existing term, like their rules of conduct, and we all know how consistent they've been with applying enforcement on different kinds of violations of the terms of conduct, and
Right.
also how this is going to be such a long road of figuring out like at who gets away with it, who doesn't, what kinds of games get away with it more, what do streams in different languages get away with it more, and especially since they're talking about the US legislation and places with similar kinds of consumer protections. That's such a vague statement where we might be in for years of articles on news sites where they're talking about how a specific streamer was banned in a non-US jurisdiction on the basis of US legislation on gambling, which actually doesn't apply there, and appeals. And it's going to be such a mess because this is not like an easily enforceable or even identifiable issue.
No, not really.
So,
Al-
I mean,
Although
this is
one of the things that is identifiable is that if someone is streaming a slot machine, they can just be taken down. So, I guess
but only ones that are unauthorized.
that's right. Only ones that are unauthorized. That's correct. An authorized slot machine is completely fine. Hey, Andre, you ever bet on a game?
On a game. Hmm.
You ever put
I
money
mean,
down?
no, not my own money. I'm probably inside of a video game, like some digital currency. I would assume, yeah,
Yeah.
almost certainly. But real Canadian dollars through a third-party website or some kind of system, no,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
very recently I dropped a few hundred on a battle pass, and it was a bet that I would actually end up playing the game that I bought the battle pass for. I lost. So far, I've lost. You know what you have wagered though is your time on
It's
a
true.
wonderful game that we call Destiny 2.
All right, so I guess this is our cue to
That's
move
a
into
segue, baby.
actual,
Yeah.
yeah, the actual what have you been playing segment. So, yeah, I've been playing Destiny 2. I got back into it begrudgingly. I've been recording a lot of gameplay and data for work, and this was a game that I don't look at really for work. I mean, maybe now there's like a project where a little bit, but I got back into it because it's so divorced from everything else I do that it felt like it was something I could relax with.
Yeah.
And it's been a mixed bag. There's a
Okay.
lot of good, there's some bad, and there's some really funny stuff that I've been seeing over the last, I guess, 3 or 4 weeks.
That's interesting. I thought you were having a good time with it, but maybe let's start with some of the good.
Yeah.
What's going super well in Destiny 2 these days?
So for context for folks who don't know, Destiny is kind of a first-person shooter with fantasy elements and sci-fi, and you get to build up characters, and there's a lot of RPG elements. So I've come back now after effectively like a year and a half away, and they reworked all the default classes through a new, more modular customization system, and that's been a ton of fun because people, I guess, got fed these class rollouts on a seasonal model, so about one every 3 months or so. But I just got all of them at the same time
Right.
on top of the last campaign. So this is the Witch Queen campaign. So there was just like a lot of content for me to go through, and it is for Destiny really good content. And I would say for shooter games or for these kinds of like loot-based games, it's probably the most solid and enduring formula I've seen over the last, I don't know, half a decade that I'm still into playing and kind of works for me.
Mm.
So that part's been fantastic. What else has been fantastic? There's a lot more like systems for matchmaking and like queuing into activities, so that's also been great. And there's just some really cool individual weapons and armor pieces that change the way your character plays. So it really is, I think the good is highly concentrated in the content, like what you can do, how you can do it, and everything that there is to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm playing it too, and I mean, one of the things that I've really noticed about the game, for listeners who don't know us yet, because how would you? It's our first episode. I research toxic game communities, and I got into Destiny 2, not really with any expectations, and honestly, among the communities I've been in, it's among the friendliest, or at least the negative interactions are more silence and people just leaving runs than some of the more aggressive stuff you'll find in other games. In my experience, I found it much easier to find groups who are more welcoming. Generally,
Yeah.
that may not be everyone's experience, but certainly from coming from some of the more toxic games that I look at, it's felt like a fairly friendly space to me,
Yeah.
which has been cool. Although I do have to say, if you're coming in fresh into Destiny 2, there's a lot of content. Like there's a lot of game there, and so it's not always clear what you should be doing.
So this gets me kickstarted on the bad,
Okay.
right? Which is that content, a lot of it is really good. And I think the way that it's parceled out has become an issue. Like we clocked this years ago when they started moving towards the seasonal system and that stuff was going to be locked into it. So maybe we should talk about how it's split up because that'll make it clear for players.
Yeah, why
So
not?
Destiny right now is theoretically free to play, right? You can pick up the game for $0 and play a fair chunk of it. Now, not everything is free to play. So there's content that's locked behind two of the current big expansions, so Beyond Light and Witch Queen. And Beyond Light actually locks one of the four subclasses. So there's three main classes: Warlock, Titan, and Hunter, and each one has four subclasses. So the Stasis Element one is locked behind that expansion for everyone. So if you want to play those classes, you have to buy that content. If you want to play the campaign that's in that zone, which is included with that expansion, you also have to purchase the expansion. Now they did some of this also for Witch Queen, although classes aren't locked behind it, but there's a zone that is very specifically it's available to go to, but all the activities in it are sort of locked behind or this I should clarify, the story activities are locked behind the expansion. There's also seasons that are sold individually when you are in that season. So for now, Season of Plunder is on, so you can purchase Season of Plunder for something like $15.
And if you want to play the
Canadian.
Warlock class, you should, because that jacket that you get is really nice. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, but if you want to play the older seasons, so the last two that have just lapsed, you actually have to buy the deluxe version of this expansion, which will still let you access the old season passes and specifically activities that give you very, very good items and a lot of customization options and a lot of story content as well. And a lot of older content has just been rotated out. So particularly, we are theoretically on campaigns 3 and 4. So campaigns 1 and 2 are just gone. They're not really accessible anymore for players, even though the worlds that they happened on are mostly still around, with some having rotated, some not. And so there's also individual passes for specific dungeons, which you have to purchase. So when you go into Destiny, it's really hard first to figure out the order of things that you want to do as a new player, because they kind of took away the first parts that really made the story gel together. And then it's also really hard to figure out which content drops you want to be buying and where things that you want to do are located. And then to figure out, okay, well, I want to build this character, and there's a lot of weapons that people tell me are really good. Where are they? So you have to like open up a third-party tool to sort of figure out how they roll and where to get them, or you can look inside the collections tab inside the game, and then it's super complicated. If it's hard for us to figure out, and we sort of do this for a living, I can imagine a completely new player opening this up and just saying no and closing the game.
Yeah, one of the strange things for me, and to be honest, I'm not sure I totally fully understand how this works, but there are packs that you have to buy that then open the opportunity for you to get items that are in those packs. Like I believe the Forsaken pack opens this way, where there are a bunch of very cool weapons that you use in the game that you don't get even access to in your loot pool. You buy it and then they become potentials. Like there's something you may get, which is it doesn't feel amazing to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on, and now also there's a discussion of like there's a bit of burnout with the current season because it requires a lot of grinding, and so people are like, well, do I really want to grind? But like maybe these weapons will become good in the future, and by that point they'll be much harder to access, so I have to farm them now so I can get them to a, like if you collect multiples you can then craft them permanently. And so even once they rotate out you can still make them, and you can make the best versions of them actually. It's really complicated, so that part I'm really not hot on, and I think I'm not like feeling it so much because I'm not that invested currently. Like I'm playing this not as my main social game. I'm playing this to kind of wind down from other stuff, and I feel like that's been a pretty good way of engaging with Destiny, where I'm having fun when I want to play, but I'm not putting myself through the ringer to play.
Right.
Because then all the FOMO stuff kicks in, and I think you really start to feel like the weekly cycle and how much crap you have to do and how much you have to match make and how many raids and dungeons and all this stuff you have to rotate through to actually get everything up to par. There's also a system that I really, really, really don't like in the game currently, and that's the way that mods work.
Okay.
So you have to buy a lot of mods to make your builds gel. So some builds really don't care. Some builds basically only work once you have a very specific configuration of mods. These are only accessible through a vendor that rotates 4 of them daily. And it's completely random. So, for example, I've been missing a mod that is in like 80% of builds that I've been seeing this season. And for 3 weeks, I've just been checking a Reddit thread every day to see if it's up. And that thread is full of people who are complaining that, they also have other mods that they're specifically waiting for. And it feels kind of bad. Like there's no deterministic way to go and work to get these or run content. You just kind of have to wait.
Well,
you have to show up to the game.
This is super interesting too because I am playing the game from a very casual perspective. I'm researching it intensively, but like I'm not min-maxing my playthrough of Destiny at all. That's not what my time there is about. And nothing really directs you to the mods as an important part of the game either. If you're not fully engaged with like third-party sites or like the community and
right.
builds, or perhaps being flamed by someone because you don't have good mods or mods at all in your gear, how would you even know that this is a thing you have to do?
It's really hard, and I'll give you an example, and also for listeners who might have some trouble conceptualizing exactly how much this can impact. So you can take a character, and let's say you want to play a build where you can throw your grenade, which is like your special missile in this game, depending on your build, and it's on a default cooldown of like 2 minutes. And if you specifically know where to go play the game to get specific armor pieces, you can get that cooldown down to about 50 seconds. So already your build is, about twice as efficient in terms of how often you can use that ability. Then if you know which exotic is good for it, so your unique armor piece, you can make it even better or put the cooldown even further down. And then with mods, you can actually configure duplicate mod setups in 2 of your armor pieces to effectively make it instant. And so you go from an aspect of your character not even being really functional outside of emergency situations to it being the way that you play the game fundamentally. And there are builds where you can do that, and for example, Titans can heal infinitely and never use a gun and only fight with their melee for the hardest content in the game functionally. Or Hunters can be invisible forever, or Warlocks can freeze everything on screen permanently. And the game is, colloquially I've seen devs talk about this in recent posts, but also the community is fairly sure that the game is balanced around that level of power existing, not around the way that people play the game by default. And so I think the experience of the game is vastly different at different levels of literacy with all the systems. And I don't think it's supported well enough, and I don't think it's made accessible enough for players.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, I started doing the raid. I was researching raids, right? And I didn't want to go in, I didn't want to be a hindrance to the teams I was in. And so I did do some research and was like, I should do the easiest available build to me. And it's basically the infinite grenade spam warlock build where you just chain grenade to grenade to grenade to grenade. And it's it works. It does completely change the power level of the game, right? Like you're not struggling to kill things at all. You do have a lot more control, and I don't think that's necessarily an easy place to get to on your own through the normal course of playing the game. In a way that like a talent tree in another game is way more intuitive. You level up, you put your points in. This game has an equivalent to that as well, But when you get down to like the higher level gearing and the really min-maxy part of the game, it's not even as though it's super complex, but it really could be made more accessible to the player in the game itself, I think.
I don't know. I think the amount of time we spend with these kinds of games makes it feel not complex to us, but I can imagine someone opening it up and being like, okay, so how do item drops work? And then stumbling
No, that's true.
onto the powerful gear like tier 1, 2, 3 pinnacle, and then the upgrade materials and how you access upgrade materials, and even configuring the basics of not even what kind of gear or how you craft it or how you socket it, how do you even get it?
Yeah.
Is already complicated enough that like there's a lot of game. And if you like that kind of stuff, I think this will provide a lot of longevity for you. Like I think right now for me, for a bang for your buck kind of aspect, this has kind of replaced MMOs for me, right? I don't think I would pick up World of Warcraft for an extended period of time
Right.
outside of playing a campaign or Final Fantasy 14, because Destiny offers me that, but in a context where I can play by myself a lot more, or I have to, play with up to 5 other people at most.
It's a bit
and
more
that gives me a lot.
condensed too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's more contained. I don't feel like I have to, live my life on the game. I do feel like if I want to, be really cutting edge, I guess, in the content, I do kind of have to log on almost every day. If not, like check an API somewhere to make sure that me not logging on isn't gonna mess up my stuff for a couple months. There's I mean, we've been talking a lot about the critical stuff. I do want to talk about one of the really funny parts that I discovered this week.
Yes.
Which is really strange. So I have to give some context for this. So we talked about exotics, which are kind of like the unique weapons and armor for the game.
Mm-hmm.
So way back when the game launched, back in I want to say 2017, there was a unique gun called the Rat King.
Yes.
And the Rat King was a gun that got better the more people in your team use it, and you become invisible when you reload. It's really good right now. There's like a build that works with it. And over time, they've overhauled older items with a thing called catalysts. So they're like an upgrade you pick up for your weapon, and the upgrade drops in a very specific context. So some drop in PvP, some drop in raids, and then you have to upgrade it by completing whatever it asks you to do, usually killing a bunch of people. Now, Rat King has a main problem with this, which is you can't complete the catalyst. It has to be people in your team killing enemies with the Rat King, and it's 1,000 enemies, so it's not like it happens normally. So as you imagine, this is incredibly annoying, and people try to find groups of other people who have Rat King and would be willing to help them out to get the upgrade done for themselves, and sometimes people do it together. Now I went through the regular sort of fire team matchmaking system that's on their website.
Okay.
But in a thread discussing how to use the weapon in a build, some people started diverging in how normal people would talk in a thread to sort of start sounding like rats until they would write squeak squeak, and then somebody would link r/squeak squeak, which is a subreddit dedicated exclusively to uncovering all the secrets of the Rat King exotic weapon and forming groups around helping people. And the people who engage in r squeak squeak have begun setting up. They have a Discord server as well, and they refer to each other as brodents.
Oh no.
And they have rat-themed emojis and memes and GIFs, and it is an entire sub-community of rat-themed memery, I guess is how I would describe it. It's actually very positive and supportive. It's just really kind of unique in, I suppose, Destiny's landscape.
See, but this is the thing, and it sounds like it would be, but this is Destiny. I'm not quite there yet at what Bungie, the company that makes Destiny and runs Destiny, I'm not fully tapped into what they've done to really like make a shooter MMO ish. It's kind of an MMO, mini MMO shooter game. Two genres that are pretty notorious for having some rough communities really give out these positive vibes at times, as unexpected as this might be. Did you sign up? Are you a squeaker?
I'm 100% a Brodent.
You're a Brodent.
I've acclimated to my new rat life, 100%. But I discovered, because I thought you had to party with other members to drop the catalyst, so I discovered that I'm actually like, I'm pre-Brodent. Like, I haven't actually got the catalyst yet, so now I just have to run an infinite amount of strikes in the game, just sort of a mission type, to get it to drop, because it is part of a build I'm aiming to put together. So, you know, I suppose I'm like a Brodent elect. Like I will one day be a Brodent.
You will one day. You're on the verge of Brodency. Well, I guess we could move on.
Yeah, I think that's good for
I don't think there's anywhere to go up or down from there. I think you're at both peaks, both extremes.
So what have you been playing?
What have I been playing? A game that you can no longer gamble on your loot boxes in. Overwatch 2 is the game that I've been playing since it came out last week. Yes. So what is Overwatch 2? Well, Overwatch 2 is the sequel, in theory, to Blizzard Entertainment's competitive shooter, Overwatch, in which you are a team of 5 intrepid heroes battling another team of 5 intrepid heroes over pushing a cart to a goal. That is the magic.
There's a robot now.
Overwatch 2. There is a robot now, and the robot is very, very cute. He's pushing a little pylon, and I wish them the best in all that they do. If I had to really think about it, that robot might be my favorite part of Overwatch 2 as a game. Now, maybe we start with the good, which is I think the core Overwatch experience is still fun. And, Blizzard does a lot of good work with moment-to-moment gameplay. I've always felt that World of Warcraft, their MMO, has always felt really good to press buttons in. It feels like your character moves naturally on the ground compared to some other MMOs. And Overwatch, as far as a shooter goes, it has that, right? It feels good to play. That said, Overwatch 2 was kind of billed as a full-fledged sequel to Overwatch. It was in development for, I think, 3 years. And upon release, it's a handful of new maps. Some other maps got taken out. It's 3 new heroes and some very light rebalancing and tuning changes to some heroes on the roster. And it kind of just feels like I reinstalled Overwatch 1 after not playing it for 3 years, and this has been what they added. And that's kind of a letdown, personally. Go ahead.
Just making sure about this, because I'm curious for audiences, but they also shut down Overwatch 1 when they released this, right? So
it's only one game now.
Yes. So it's a sequel, but it's sort of cannibalized the previous Overwatch game. And also it led to massive delays in releasing new heroes and new maps in the original Overwatch, even before that 2019 announcement date, right? Like, that game has been like living at a crawl for years.
Yeah, I think the last hero to come out, I don't know this for sure, but I feel like the last time I remember playing Overwatch was when the last hero came out, and it was around the pandemic. The start of the pandemic. So it's been like 2 years since they actually added something new to the game until now. And then in 2 years, it's 3 heroes and a battle pass. Honestly, this was the most interesting thing to me, is when I first booted Overwatch, Overwatch 2, the title screen comes up, and then the next screen is it's letting you know that now the game has a battle pass, and it comes with a battle pass tutorial teaching you how to use this battle pass.
We've come full circle.
Really, you play, you buy it and you play, and you can buy levels if you want.
So, what's been your experience with the battle pass? Because we play a lot of these games that have these kind of pass systems. Do you feel like it's, is it stingy? Is it generous? Is it slow? Is it fast?
I played the beta, and so I bought the battle pass. And so for me, having already spent money, like I bought into it, I feel like it goes pretty quickly compared to other passes. Like there's daily, weekly challenges, there's seasonal challenges, and they move it along. The rewards aren't particularly exciting. Like at every 10 levels, you have like a capstone reward, which is a skin. But in the middle, it's a lot of sprays and like weapon ornaments you really can't see. It's quick, but it's not an exciting spread of stuff.
How about the so I haven't seen how it's spread out or whatever, but I did hear that depending on if you own the original or how you're in this, the 3 new heroes are on the battle pass, right? Like they're not accessible to everyone.
Just the most recent one, I believe this is correct, that the new tank they released, the new DPS character they released are just out for everyone, and it's Kiriko? I don't know her name.
Kiriko.
Yeah, Kiriko. It's the new healer class. She is, if you were a returning player or if you bought the pass, she's available immediately. If you're completely fresh, she's in the higher tiers. Like she's past node 50 of the pass. I think she's fairly far up there. If you're really playing, I don't think she's too challenging to get to. But I'm a lifelong, not lifelong, but I've played Dota for a large portion of my adult life, and I'm really opposed to the model where things that you play in the game are locked behind anything other than one premium purchase for everything if you're selling a premium purchase game. Cosmetics are fair game to me, but I really don't think for a competitive game you should have anything locked that is like gameplay affecting.
So how do you feel about the departure of loot boxes in terms of how you're accessing like these rewards and everything? Do you feel like it's better, worse, just different? Like is it actually an improvement?
So if you think of the gambling research we do, I think really early on there was the sense that getting rid of loot boxes is a good thing because you can get what you want. You're not going to dump in a ton of cash into these random roll rewards, and you're never going to get the thing you're chasing, right? Because that is the predatory part of loot boxes, which is if you really want that item and your body is compelled to get it, and there's no way to just get the thing you want, which isn't strictly true. You could save up currency and get some of the skins in that game. This kind of cuts down on the predatory aspect because you're not going to dump in $200 on however many rolls to try and get the thing that you're looking for. In practice, now you just have to spend like $20 for the one skin that you want, and you get really nothing else except for like the battle pass skins that you buy and unlock. You're kind of losing this sense of like, if I play 10 games of Overwatch, I'll get a roll of something, and maybe it'll be a skin for a hero I never play, and maybe that will convince me to go play that hero now for a little bit. I'll try something new. There's a bit of magic in that. Like, if you take the loot box concept away from buying the loot boxes and you just get these, trickled out rewards that feel pretty good. Because I always thought it was cool to get loot boxes. I never bought them, but you got them randomly when you played Overwatch 1. And you didn't know what you were going to get. And it was exciting to get something really cool, like a really nice skin out of them. And that just doesn't happen anymore. And I actually miss it from the old Overwatch experience.
Yeah, I was seeing the reason why I asked is I didn't have a good sense for this since I've only been watching people who are playing or
Yeah.
talking about it, and it seemed to be like a recurring pattern that people felt like stuff is very expensive because they kind of it if I understand this correctly, they took away the loot
Yeah, they're
boxes,
gone.
but they didn't add a lot of new avenues to make up the gold quickly or to farm it.
No,
And
you
so,
you get very little. I think weekly you get something like 30 to 50.
yeah.
It's in that range. It feels bad. The thing I can tell you without knowing the exact number is I looked at how much you get from playing, and it is in that 30 to 50 range. It is not a lot, and the skins, the good ones, are like 2,000 of the in-game currency. It converts to about $20. Um,
Do you feel subsequent question to this,
yeah.
right? Is so now the team structure's changed, right? We're
Yep.
we're down from 6 players to 5, and
Yep.
there's only one tank per team. Do you feel like, how stingy the model is, or how you access stuff is going to be felt differently by different people? Like, for listeners, I'm kind of notorious for always trying to one trick a character inside of a game like this. So I would probably play only Reinhardt or only Hanzo, versus I think you play a lot of different characters
Yeah, I
in a
do
lot
that
of
in
different
every game.
roles.
Yeah, every game I play, I do that. It's the way I do this. And I mean, yeah, you're supremely advantaged in this system if you enjoy cosmetics and you enjoy playing one or two characters, you can much more effectively customize those two characters to your liking. For me, the loot box system was much better because I would get random stuff for everybody. And I like to play most things, or at least like to dabble in every hero, right? Like for you, if you play 1 to 3 heroes, I'm the opposite. It's like I don't play 1 to 3 heroes on the roster, right? It's like these are the ones I don't like, and everything else I'm super happy to play once in a while. And yeah, I was going through the skins and I was like, oh, I'd love to have this for this and this for this, but like I could get one, and that's the one I'm gonna get ever because I'm not putting another dime into that game. And part of the reason I'm not is because like there it feels like there's no reward for the non-competitive player. Like if you're not chasing rank, what are you chasing? What is the extra spice or the extra sauce on this? And
Right.
there's nothing because there's no after I play 7 games or 10 games or whatever. There's no like, oh, what do I get? Ah, it wasn't good. Next 10 games, maybe I'll get something cool out of this box. That's not there, and honestly, I don't want it to sound super harsh, but without that added spice, the game's kind of boring. Like, it really feels like a throughput game now, is how I've been describing it, which is like, because there are fewer players on the map, there are fewer opportunities, I think, to do wacky stuff. You really have to play around your team, and you always had to in Overwatch, but now it feels even more so. You're really punished for trying to do something fun. Um, like
Mhm.
a bad Genji right now isn't just creating an inconvenience where the other players have to pick up the slack. It's pretty much a throw if that player's trying to flank and not doing well at all, right? Because one of your two DPS is gone, and there's no way to make up that number. And so it really is. I've been noticing in all the games I'm playing, it's typically like the player with the lowest stat, either healing output or damage output, their team is losing, and that's
Uh,
just the way it's going.
that's a bummer because, and I'm sure we'll talk about this someday when we do an Overwatch episode, but a lot of the original fun seemed to be around having pocket combos,
Yeah.
and you could make like a duo or trio, and like maybe the other like really good players could carry it even if you were messing around and trying some stuff.
Hmm.
And if it really is that the case that there's so much more weight on each individual player's shoulders, it has to feel really bad to be like a new player in this, learning the game now when people who never stop playing are still here, and you're either learning a character or trying a
Yeah.
new character. I don't know.
Yeah,
It,
it,
it
it, it definitely does. And I think maybe I'll close with this. one example of playing is it's not only is it a lot of pressure on the new players, the new configuration I think is even more frustrating than it used to be. Overwatch had a bit of a toxicity problem to begin with, but now I think it's even concentrated because it's very easy to pinpoint the failure if you open the scoreboard. If something is going wrong for you in the game, you can open it up and really see where a teammate is kind of under delivering. And I'm an average player, maybe slightly above, but I don't underperform most games. I did have a bad game, and one of the healers in the game was just they basically started micromanaging everything I'm doing in the chat, which is one of my pet peeves. It's like we all have bad games, just leave me alone and we'll get to the next one. But instead of being like, oh my god, what the hell, I was like, I kind of get it though. Because you'd really wish I'd be doing the thing you want me to be doing, because you have so few options outside of really, and that player was probably just an average player as well. Like, I'm not saying we're both high skilled or one of us is lower or higher than the other. They were playing better than me in that particular match, but I can totally see why me underperforming in that match would really upset them in that moment, because it feels like you as a player can't really make up the difference. It really is just like, can you encourage the failing player to play a bit better? And I think that's kind of a bad vibe for the aesthetic that Overwatch has, for the marketing that Blizzard is trying to do to make Overwatch a more generally applicable game. Like they're trying to make it a game for everybody, you know? They're trying. But that ain't the way that this is going to work if that's the social environment you've set up. And it is. Yeah. And it's worse than it used to be. It's not playful. You can't do a team full of 6 of the same character jumping around onto the point. You can still do these pocket combos and stuff, but there's not a lot of experimentation, I think, even at this stage of the game. This re-release stage, where in most new games it's the exploratory phase. It's where people are learning, and you can feel that you're kind of on the same level as others, because everyone is processing new information, right? That's not here. That's completely gone. And I think it's rough. It's rough for new players. I think it's going to be rough for players who want to play more casually, or who aren't as high skilled. But even at high skill levels now, I think it's going to be very, very easy for teams to just look and be like, this is the flaw, right? And
you find a one level 1 character.
Yeah, and I don't think that's going to be good overall. I don't know.
Yay, Overwatch!
Yay, Overwatch! It's having... And also, last point, for the first week of this game, the game barely loaded. It was taken offline so many times, and the character that I was having the most fun playing, Bastion, who got a decent rework in the game, was just removed from the game for a bug, and he was gone for days. And so... maybe all this is impacting the perspective I have on the experience, but let's just say this. Overwatch 2, I wanted to love you. I'm still playing you, but for how long? I don't know.
Yeah, fair. And yeah, so I guess that's our week, right?
That's our
Destiny,
week!
Overwatch,
yeah, and
gambling. Twitch gambling.
That's right. What a week. Well,
yeah.
That's us for today, and we'll be back next week with whatever is interesting to us at that moment in time. So
I have some thoughts.
Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week on CTG Weekly.